Today, class, we're going to learn more about quadratic functions, but this time we will be writing them in standard form from a graph. Here's the factored form of a quadratic formula. F of x, which is y, is equal to a times the quantity of x minus r sub 1 times the quantity of x minus r sub 2. Where r sub 1 and r sub 2 are the zeros or the x-intercepts. In order for us to deal with this, again, we will review that if A is opening up or down, there are certain things that you have to look for. So if A is less than 0, so here's A, is less than 0, which means that A has to be a negative number, then it's going to open down and you're going to get a frown. If A is greater than 0, that means that A is a positive number, then it opens up and you get a smile. Another thing that we talked about earlier is that r sub 1 and r sub 2 determines the zeros or the x-intercepts. So let's look at the first example. Here you have a graph, and we're going to take this graph and put it in the factored form. F of x is equal to a times the quantity of x minus r sub 1 times the quantity of x minus r sub 2. So the first thing we need is to find the x-intercepts or the zeros. So the x-intercepts or the zeros in this case would be 4, that's one of them, and the other one is 8. So we'll take those two zeros or x-intercepts and replace them where you see r sub 1 and r sub 2. So we end up with the formula f of x is equal to a times the quantity of x minus 4 times the quantity of x minus 8. Now what we need to do is find a. And we're going to find a by using a point on the graph. The point on the graph that is noted is 6, negative 4. So we're going to take 6, which is x, and replace it where we see the x in the form. And then f of x, which is my y, I'm going to take this and put it back in the place of f of x in the form. And we end up with negative 4 equals a times the quantity of 6 minus 4 times the quantity of 6 minus 8. So now we need to go ahead and find the numbers that represent 6 minus 4, which is 2, and 6 minus 8, which is negative 2. And we take those two numbers. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So on the right side, we have negative 4a, and on the left side, we have negative 4. We're going to divide both sides by negative 4, so a is 1. And since a is a positive number, we see from the graph that it is opening up, which is what is supposed to happen. So now we're going to take 1, put it back in the place of a in the first step, and we end up with f of x is equal to 1 times the quantity of x minus 4 times the quantity of x minus 8. Now 1 is understood to be in front of the parentheses anyway, so we can get rid of that and rewrite it as f of x is equal to x minus 4 times the quantity of x minus 8. Now let's look at example 2. Remember, we're going to use the form f of x equals a times the quantity of x minus r sub 1 times the quantity of x minus r sub 2, where r sub 1 and r sub 2 are my zeros or x-intercepts. Now notice in the form we see that there is an operation of a minus. So therefore that's going to be very important. If my x-intercept or my zeros are negative, that operation becomes plus. because a minus times a negative is positive, which is plus. So let's look for the zeros. One of our zeros is -7. The other 0 is -3. And since both of our zeros are negative, when we substitute it back in the form, it becomes +7 and +3. Now we need to find the A by using a point on the graph. The point on the graph we have is -4, -3. So wherever you see X, you're going to put -4 in the place of X, and we're going to put -3 in the place of f of X. So therefore, X is -4 and f of X is -3. So now once you replace them, our form is now -3 equals A times the quantity of -4 plus 7 times the quantity of -4 plus 3. Now we need to simplify what's inside of the parentheses. -4 plus 7 is 3, and -4 plus 3 is -1. So now we want to multiply 3 times -1, which is -3. A equals -3. Undo multiplying by -3. So we divide both sides by -3. So 1 equals A, or A is equal to 1. So now we're going to replace 1 where you see A in the form, and we end up with f of X equals the quantity of X plus 7 times the quantity of X plus 3. Now let's look at example 3. Here again, the form that we're going to write the equation in is f of X equals A times the quantity of X minus R sub 1 times the quantity of X minus R sub 2, where R sub 1 and R sub 2 are my zeros or x-intercepts, and A is the number that tells me whether my parabola opens up or down. Now if you look at the graph, it's opening down, which means A has to be a negative number. So once we find A, make sure that it is a negative number. So now we need to find the zeros. One of the zeros in this case is -10 and also -6. So we're going to take those two numbers, since they're negative, put them back in the place of R sub 1 and R sub 2, and that minus becomes plus. So we end up with f of X equals A times the quantity of X plus 10 times the quantity of X plus 6. Now we need another point on the graph. This time we're going to use the vertex, which is -8, 4. X is -8 and f of X is 4. So take those two numbers and replace them in the place of X and f of X in the previous equation. And you end up with 4 equals A times the quantity of -8 plus 10 times the quantity of -8 plus 6. Simplify inside the parentheses, and now we have 4 equals A times 2 times -2. 2 times -2 is -4. So we rewrite the equation as 4 equals -4A. Undo multiplying by -4. So we're going to divide both sides by -4. So -1 equals A, or A equals -1. And here again, since A is negative, the parabola opens down, which it does. So now we're going to take -1, put it back in the place of A, and our form is now f of X equals the opposite of the quantity of X plus 10 times the quantity of X plus 6. Now notice I didn't put the 1 behind the negative because it's understood to be a 1. So we get rid of the 1 and just put a negative there. Now in example 4, this parabola is still opening down. So now notice we're still going to write it in the factored form, where A is going to tell you whether it opens up or down, and x are going to be replaced in a few, and then r sub 1 and r sub 2 are my zeros or x-intercepts. So notice that one of my zeros is -3 and the other 0 is +1. So I'm going to take those two and replace them where I see r sub 1 and r sub 2. Now since one of them is negative, it's going to be a plus that number, and the other one is positive, it'll be minus that number. So now we end up with f of x equals a times the quantity of x minus 3 times the quantity of x plus 3. It does not matter which number goes where, as long as you put them in the place of r sub 1 and r sub 2. Now we need to find a. Remember, a has to be a negative number. So we can use either of the points that are on the graph, and you want to make sure that you use the easiest one. In this case, the graph is intersecting the y-axis at 6. So we're going to use 0, 6 as our point on the graph, where x is 0 and f of x is 6. Take 0, put it back in the place of x, and put 6 back in the place of f of x, and you end up with 6 equals a times the quantity of 0 minus 1 times the quantity of 0 plus 3. Do the math. -1 times 3 gives me -3a equals 6. Divide both sides by -3, and we get a is equal to -2. So now you're going to take that -2, put it back in the place of a, and voila, we have our equation, which is f of x equals -2 times the quantity of x minus 1 times the quantity of x plus 3. Now let's look at another example where the x-intercept, or zeros, is only 1. Now this is the end of our lesson. Please make sure you go back, review the examples and the form over and over again until you understand it, and then go to your assignment and complete it. But please make sure you turn that assignment in. Your assignment is going to be located in Focus and also in Teams. You can upload it in Focus and also in Teams. Choose the one you rather upload your assignment to. Do that and have a good day.